the cameras? Did you?
They've been started, Madam Chair. I'll let you know when we are streaming.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are live.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Electoral Area Services Committee Special Committee meeting for July 7th of 2021. I'd like to first acknowledge that we are all having this meeting on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people. And with that, I look to the committee for an approval of the agenda. Moved. Second. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Is there anybody for public input, Ms. Harrison?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is none.
Thank you. We turn now then to our reports. Go ahead, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first report, item R1, is a report from the Community Planning Division regarding HOCP and MOCP update. And there is a 10-point recommendation before you. I believe staff is here to speak to this report.
Yes. Yes, thank you so much. And go ahead, Ms. Breen. Welcome. Good morning.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. It's our pleasure to be here today from Community Planning to present the work that we've been doing over the last 6 months or so, and update you on 4270, the HOCP, present some information to be reviewed over the summer on the MOCP, and to introduce some new policy work, which Alison Garnett will do after I go through bylaw 4270, the HOCP, and the MOCP information in your package. So I'm just going to start the slideshow now. Can everyone see that?
Not yet. It's starting. There we go. Yes. Just need to enlarge it. We see the side screen, the sides panel.
How's that? Is that the full slide?
It's not the full. I see there's a little side. It's on the right-hand side now.
We're seeing your presenter view, Corley.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get out of this. And
oh, there you go. Oh,
there?
You did have it a second ago. No, you did have it a second ago.
Slideshow. Is that better?
Yes. Oh, you've got it.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
So today, what I'm going to do in my portion of the presentation is present the highlights of the referrals on bylaw 4270, the official community plan for electoral areas, otherwise known as the HOCP. I'm going to give a very high-level presentation on the MOCP policy papers. That bylaw will be 4373. The social equity lens and the indicators. This information is provided in the package for information for your reading pleasure over the next 2 or 3 months. There will be a workshop specifically on the MOCP policy papers in the fall, and a few other items on the agenda today. Emily Dixon in Community Planning will present the engagement and consultation plan. We're seeking your approval to proceed with that today. I will provide an overview of bylaws, policies, and plans in the timeline for over the next couple of years. This is for information. I won't go through it in detail. It is in your package, but it's there to give you an idea of the scope of work that is in front of us in community planning over the next few years. You will also see in your package a draft community amenity policy. This is also for information and will come forward into the director's workshop at the end of September. It will require probably quite a bit of discussion in terms of options, et cetera. So it's just put in front of you as a draft. It's not complete, but it is, again, for your contemplation over the summer. And then I'll also be seeking today, as a last recommendation, direction to bring forward a staff report on a review of the APC bylaw 3544 in the context of now advancing to one official community plan and options for your consideration for perhaps some changes. And then I'll quickly go through the recommendations that are in the staff report today. All right, this is an old familiar slide here today, but for the purpose of public who may be watching and not familiar of this, and just as a quick review for everyone here, we're now in the middle and the last section, the third section. We started off with 7 OCPs that are currently the official bylaws for the electoral areas. We have draft bylaw 4270. And we also have the beginning building blocks for the MOCP, which is underway. So in your package, you'll see that there was
excuse me, Ms. Breen, you're just in the presenter mode on our screen. So if you can fix that, you need to change your screen.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure why it's reverting. Is that better?
No, it's still.
Ms. Chair, if I may just help Coralie for a second.
Go ahead.
Coralie, if you could just go back to where you were play from beginning or play from current slide.
Yeah, I'm on current slide. It says from current slide at the top of my screen.
Okay, yeah, click that button. And then at the top there where it says display settings.
Yes.
Click that one. And then swap presenter view and slide view.
Thank you, Emily.
Oh,
Oops, then
did it not
then
work?
it flipped back again. No.
Yeah, I'm not touching anything and it's clicking back. I'm not
Okay,
really
I
sure
think we're
what's
still. I think the committee still sees the screen and the committee is fine then. Is that okay? Not hearing any objections. Go ahead, please, if
Okay.
that's doing that.
Thank you. So bylaw 4270 was sent out on referral in December of 2020 per direction of the board. And from December through till the spring of 2021, we received referral comments from the Agricultural Land Commission, most of the APCs, Islands Trust, MOTI, Ministry of Transportation, and the Ministry of Agriculture. We gave presentations to most of the APCs, Cowichan Tribes, Yakson, and Malahat First Nation. The actual package comments you'll see from the APCs, which actually chronologues their comments over the last 18 months, was over 100 pages. They're provided for transparency purposes in preparation for the public hearing. It's up to you whether you want to read them, but again, that's for the purpose of the directors and for the public. I won't go through those changes today. But I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has on them. The key changes on the HOCP in terms of content really came from the Agricultural Land Commission and the Ministry of Agriculture. They very much strongly supported the buffer that we have on non-agricultural lands adjacent to agricultural lands in the DP. They strongly suggested stronger language on subdivision applications that were only beneficial to agriculture or met the criteria of the home site severance policy, which was brought in in 1974. And they also reviewed all of our GIS ALR mapping and for accuracy, and there were some changes made as a result of that. The other change, just to bring to your attention from MOTI, was requesting that we include stronger policy language to ensure that access is limited, developed to limit impact on existing transportation networks. And from the APCs, there was quite a bit of work done in the parks area. We as in GIS, updated all of the parks maps from the local area plans. And we also removed those into one schedule, a new schedule, parks, for simpler administrative purposes. There is one change that we'd like to draw your attention to in Appendix 3 to Schedule A. Schedule A is the main part of Bylaw 4270, and we have replaced a figure in there on Table 6.7, and it basically is defining community parks, excluding regional, sub-regional parks, and excluding recreation areas, which changed the metrics in terms of that particular figure. So we'd like to draw your attention to that change as well. That just happened over the last few days. Several key mapping changes in the last 6 months. And we have, in fact, moved along on the modernization. In development, Schedule C development permit areas, we have replaced the sensitive ecosystem inventory with the Madrone mapping, which was a board directive from 2018. The wildfire hazard maps have been changed with the new wildfire hazard reports. We have some floodplain hazard changes as a result of the 3 new reports that came through from environment. So we have made those changes. And there's been some updated mappings in landslide hazard and the protection of farming. We've clarified the buffer in those particular DP. So that has in fact advanced a lot of the board directives from the last 2 or 3 years. We've also included all the dam mapping. So there were 7 reports that came through from engineering that have now been updated in Bylaw 4270. We've updated Schedule D because of the ALC's review on our agricultural land reserve. We've also updated the land use designations to be consistent with all OCP bylaw amendments up to the last few weeks. You'll see here in Schedule O, this is a new schedule, a floodplain and dam designation maps. We will bring forward in early September 3 new bylaws, Bylaw 4348 Shawnigan, 4358 River Bottom Road, 4381 Coxila flood mapping, and actually another 4360, which is a Shawnigan zoning bylaw amendment that will replace information in the DPs under the floodplain hazard, and these will be standalone bylaws that will we'll be recommending third reading and do not require public hearing.
Excuse me again, excuse me again. I just had some questions. If you would prefer questions I'm wondering if we should have questions as we go along with each slide. What would you prefer? Just because you have so much information, I'm not sure.
I'm happy to do whatever the directors decide.
Okay, I'm looking to the committee. What would you prefer? Is there any directors that would like questions through the slideshow or at the end? I'm not hearing any comments, so go ahead. Oh,
Okay.
Director Morrison. Director Morrison.
Yeah, I was waving as well, Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry, I can't see anyone, but you could speak up because I have the screen in front of me. So would you like to have questions as we go along?
Yeah, I think
Wilson?
it would be better because it's this is going to be such a long presentation that we forget our questions afterwards.
So each slide will do a question. Okay. So is there any questions now that the slides that we've gone through already? Go ahead, Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, two questions, Coralie. It's a huge amount of work, and this has been going on for a long, long time. You mentioned a phrase, social equity, at the beginning of the thing. Can you tell me what that actually means?
So through the chair, that we will talk about that when I introduce the MOCP policy papers. It's a slide forthcoming.
Oh, okay. And the other one, very quickly, Madam Chair, if it's okay, quick follow-up. This presentation is full of information, and will it be made available on the CVRD website for the public to go through and for the APC chairs?
Through the chair, absolutely.
Good. Thank you very much.
Okay, and you'll have to speak up if I've missed anyone else that would like, has questions currently.
I do.
I do.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Director Morrison, and then go following Director Smith. Go ahead, Director Morrison.
So thank you through you, Madam Chair. So I've got a couple of questions. Like, this is just a huge amount of information, and I think I've gone through most of it almost twice, and I guess I've spotted some things in there, and obviously there's going to be tweaks, and you've said that we've got this information to consider over the summer. I guess where we see some things that we might want to question or see amended, or we might note as inaccuracies, that sort of thing. When's the right time to address those? And I'll just use one example. There's the new floodplain and dam designation map, and I took a pretty close look at that, and I happen to know that the dam up above my community is never full of water because it's been inundated with gravels. So even if there was a dam failure, I don't see how there could ever be a run out as described in the map. So those kind of questions. I've got ALC questions. How and when will we be able to crack that nut, so to speak?
Ms. Breen?
Through the chair. If there are questions specifically on this new content that we're suggesting going to 4270 today, then I would recommend that the 4270 isn't rescinded today or advanced for second reading to the board, and that we have time to adequately address those, and we can bring forward the mapping changes unto themselves. I know Andrea and Rob have been working almost full on since the referral period on making these changes and responding as well to the reports coming forward from environment. We can add that into this workshop or have a separate workshop on it. We want everyone to be comfortable with the information. That said, we would appreciate all of those questions in advance so we can work on them as you have them over the summer.
So a follow-up, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
So that's helpful because I think we've got most of the ingredients, but I don't think it's ready to bake yet, so to speak. So the other question that I had is when I reviewed the agricultural mapping and saw the fairly, well, I thought substantial amount of ALR land in my electoral area, I came to the realization that there's only a very small portion of it is actually ALR farmable land, and that a significant amount of that is some of that swap land that has been done in the past, the 3-for-1 and 4-for-1 swapping. Has there been any comment from the ALC, because there's significant swaths of land that have only ever grown trees on them, will likely never be included in a farm inventory of any sort, and yet they still have that regulatory regime over them that is in this case hemming in potential growth of a community like Missachi Lake. Have you heard any discussion from the ALC around those particular lands?
Through the chair, yeah, through the chair, thank you. Not with respect to those particular lands. So two things, we can address that specifically with the ALC. We can have that conversation. My own experience as a planner with the ALC is that if there's any capability, they're reluctant to remove it. So, but we can certainly have those specific conversations with the ALC.
Thank you.
Okay, and I turn now to Director Smith. Go ahead, please. And if there's anyone else, they have to verbally say it. I only have so many people on my screen. So go ahead, Director Smith.
Thank you. Through the chair to staff, if we had to read as much as we did, you obviously, the staff team has definitely put in a lot of work, and it's shown very clearly in all the documents. I just was wondering, I know that the slope stability assessment was done at the end of May for the Saltaire Bluffs area and through the waterfront there. I'm just wondering, will that report be coming forward and then added to bylaw 4270, or where will that fit into this mix? Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, through the chair, we've anticipated that report and expecting the conclusion of that actually early July. And you'll note on in the DPs that we've already addressed that's forthcoming.
Follow up, Director Smith?
Thank you. A follow up. So if the bylaw 4270 is not including it at this point and we move forward with that bylaw, then does the bylaw have to be amended because it's forthcoming? I just want to make sure that we're
I believe the language, I don't have it in front of, sorry, apologies, through the chair. I believe the language is that the technical report that's currently underway on Saltaire should be considered in this DP. I believe that's the language. And I'll check it and get back to you after the meeting. And so the shorter answer would be then the bylaw would not require amendment.
Okay, follow up, Director Smith. We can go ahead.
I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Great. Anyone else? Okay, go ahead, Ms. Breen. Thank you.
All right, this next section is we're moving into the modernized official community plan bylaw 4373. The information that was added into the staff report is for summer reading. It's provided for the directors and the public to give everyone time to digest over the next 2 or 3 months before there's a workshop, before community circles commences in early 2022 to have time to review it. It's draft only, and it's just meant to provide some foundational information for the purpose of the community circles that we're planning for early 2022. Now, I'm going to go over very briefly the 8 policy areas in a moment. There is a what we're calling a social equity lens that's been added to the MOCP. This is a suggestion for your consideration. Certainly something that has been strongly added into, particularly into climate change policy assessments in the last few years. We've also been working over the last few years on indicators, so performance measurements. How do we know that the OCP is working, and where is it working, and where else can we perhaps tweak objectives and policies? So there's that document is also forthcoming. Over the last few months, and we didn't include this information because it would have just been another layer of very complex information, but we'd like to add this to the workshop in the fall, and this is the growth containment boundaries. We've been working with GIS specialist, analyst, and also our internal staff in engineering on the new draft growth containment boundaries. And so those would come forward into the fall. The other item that we're working with, which was a board direction in terms of updating the housing needs assessment, is ensuring that we have projections for growth in the MOCP and the growth containment boundaries that are aligned with the 2021 census. So that process will begin as soon as we start getting the census information. The new land use designation maps are in process. An RFP will go out in the summer for the new local area neighborhood plans. And so you can see from the ones that are in the HOCP, they're pretty scant at this time. So they will be built up with the communities and the growth containment boundary drafts, and will be discussed initially with the communities in January of 2022 in the community circles, which Emily will talk about shortly. There's an RFP going out on the community circles as well in this summer. Both of those 2 RFPs are drafted, and we're waiting today to make sure that the directors are approving our plan for engagement and consultation before we issue that. And then there's several other bylaws and bylaw reviews that are forthcoming. So would you like me to proceed, or are there any questions on that?
Have one. I see Director Morrison. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam.
Director Wilson. Oh, thank you. Director Wilson, Smith, and Morrison, go ahead first.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just took a quick look, and I understand their draft, but you've done internal review on the growth containment boundaries. I think that the ones that I was looking at for my area are too small, and there's services available in between the 2 communities. I'd like a review of that done, because I think that you could go from the east of Missachi Lake to the west of Honeymoon Bay and call that one containment or growth containment area, because there's both sewer and water available through that entire area. So it's just tweaking of things like that I'd like noted, so that when they go out, that it's a more accurate depiction of where it should be. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I have exactly the same concerns on the growth containment boundaries as Director Morrison here. I'm not too happy with it, because it seems to me that they could be bigger. We're not going to be crushing everybody into these small areas, and the centralization that comes with it. Fair enough, we have to have the services in place and all the rest of it. but I would much rather see these looked at very, very carefully so that we don't get this overcrowding that we may be seeing if they are made too small.
Okay, thank you. Both noted.
Okay, we'll go ahead to Director Smith.
Thank you. I just wanted to know what the RFP will be for. It doesn't indicate here. It says local area neighborhood plan. And will a consultant be hired to run the communication and the engagement portion for those? Is that what the RFP is for?
Ms. Breen? Oh dear. We have a little glitch on that.
Swirling circle of death.
Yeah, 2 circles of death. Ms. Breen and also Director Martman at the same time. I don't know if IT can, or, oh, there they are. Okay, you went away for a bit. Go ahead, Ms. Breen.
Good morning through the chair. My apologies. I do have Emily on backup if it happened. I'm actually in the office, so if she needs to take over, I was hoping to.
Oh, thank you. That's good to know. Thank you. Yes, that's good. Go ahead. So did you hear Director Smith's question?
Through the chair, yes. And in response, the local area and neighborhood plans, it's a 3-year plan. And in terms of, we'll be looking at every electoral area and the new land use planning, the census information, the growth containment boundaries, and we will be doing that with a consultant and with staff, and it will be kicked off in the community circles. Now, I don't want to steal Emily's thunder, but the community circles most of them will be led through communities, but there will be some staff led community circles, and they will be the ones on the neighborhood plans and the local plans.
Okay.
The RFP for engagement and actually there isn't an RFP on engagement and consultations. Staff is planning to do most of that, but there is one on the community circles in terms of some of the pieces that need to be developed.
Follow up, Director Smith?
Thank you. I'm good.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Breen.
The challenge, as we're all aware now, is and has been from the beginning with the HOCP is making everything more clear, more concise, and consistent throughout. So the 8 policy areas in the MOCP have derived from the harmonized OCP. They were presented in the open houses of February of 2020. You'll see that the language is modernized from the HOCP, but they're essentially, and I say this with quotation marks, essentially derivatives of those presented in the HOCP. You're familiar with the Transect, that's our organizing framework. We do have a video explaining this. It's been circulated to the directors and it is on our webpage right now. In terms of what we're calling the organizing framework and logic. So I won't go through that today, but what I wanted to give you today is just a very high level overview of the document that we hope you'll enjoy reading. So the policy papers have an overview of the modernized official community plan, a draft vision with the goals, the growth containment objectives and boundaries, the plan structure, the relationship to the Transect, the organizing framework, and content on jurisdictional limitations for clarity on where the directors have clear jurisdictional authority and where they have opportunities to be advocates. And generally you'll find those things that are of the advocacy nature are listed as objectives or advocacy, and those that are within the realm of jurisdiction of regional district authority are in the policy section. So here are the 8 areas. Manage infrastructure responsibly, make distinct complete communities, expand mobility options, protect and enhance natural assets, strengthen local food and agriculture systems, enhance regional prosperity, mitigate and adapt to the climate crisis, improve governance and implementation.
Any questions? Go ahead, Ms. Breen.
Through the chair. Policy chapters, here are the symbols that you'll see. So without reviewing them, those are the 8 again. You'll see the policy chapters are structured in 2 main sections. There's a context, an introduction, what the stresses are in that area, the objectives, the policy by transect area, complementary policy, and advocacy policy. In the interest of time, I won't read all of these, but this is for your review for later, and the PowerPoint will be made available and circulated. It's slightly different than the one that's in your package. So coming back to managing infrastructure responsibly, and this one I will spend a little bit more time just so you can understand the how the chapters are structured. But we do identify the stresses, which are the considerations. What do we need to be considering in the decision making as it relates to this area? So, for example, life cycle considerations, limits to capacity, the key topics, and which doesn't mean that it's this is exhaustive, but these are some of the key areas. If someone's looking at it, what are they going to find in this section? And again, we're trying to write the policy papers to make them accessible so that you don't have to be completely conversant in planning to understand the point of each chapter. And then the key objectives. What are the objectives here? And under this particular policy area, key objectives include responsible infrastructure management through long-range plans that address growth demands, operational efficiency, and financial and environmental sustainability. So you're seeing the modernization of the language from the HOCP. Should I continue?
Yes, go ahead. I don't see any other, there's no questions. Go ahead.
Okay. Policy area 2, make distinct, complete communities. Same thing. You'll see the stresses. What are the stresses here? Key topics and objectives. The third one, expand mobility options and the stresses. What are the considerations there? We know we've got Holly working on active transportation right now, active transportation plan. The plans that are happening and will be integrated here. And I'll just keep going on the policy areas.
I do have a question on that one. Go ahead, Director Morrison.
Actually, it was the previous slide, if you could go back to that.
Mobility or the other one?
The distinct complete communities.
Okay, there we
so I don't know if your staff are aware of this, but a key topic in the rural areas is rural sprawl, and you know that's an issue that that we're grappling with at our APCs, and you know trying to ensure that any new growth is you know connected to services. So I think that should be a stress in there, and I don't know if it's been considered, but I bring it up for you, bring it to your attention.
Thank you.
Through the chair, that's an excellent point. Thank you.
I have a question. If you just go back to the, seems like takes me a minute to think about this.
Yeah.
So under the key topics, some of the items there, they're not in our jurisdiction as electoral areas. I know, like, for example, the childcare, we have it in our zoning that it's a permitted use. Does that not cover it under zoning when it comes to a permitted use, because when we start looking at some of these, they may not be our jurisdictions. So do they just become objectives, or where do they actually fit? And the same for the arts and culture portion. Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, exactly. There still is room in the OCP for advocacy in areas where there isn't complete authority. You will recall there was a childcare plan. I believe it was before Christmas, brought through community services. The board directed that we include content in the HOCP coming from that plan, which we did. It isn't policy, but we do have content in the regards of either objectives or advocacy policies in the MOCP. And the same thing on arts and culture.
Thank you. Follow up, Director Smith?
Thank you. I'm fine.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Protect and enhance natural assets.
Excuse me, I do have a question
Sorry.
on the previous slide. I do apologize.
Okay,
On mobility. Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
Through the chair to staff, I'm wondering that, you know, if we, when it comes to the key topics, are we looking at alternates to like the BC Transit? You know, I know that when you look around the world, there's other options that people are using to get from A to B in transportation. And I know that the CVRD has heavily invested in BC Transit, but it may not be what's actually working for electoral areas and some of the very rural communities and the direction that people are wanting to go. So will we be looking at that, or staff will be looking at how we have other options and solutions that maybe move away from using the buses and have some sort of other direction in there? Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, we will. And we also are inviting those types of discussions through the community circles, where we will be collecting all of the ideas and then coming back into the MOCP papers and amending them accordingly. So yes, as a shorter answer, we will.
No follow-up. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Breen.
Protect and enhance natural assets. This is particularly with the new drinking water management plan, direction to look at as much as we can watershed planning. We are already applying this lens in terms of the land use designation framework. This is more complex work, but this is analysis that is spatial analysis that is already underway. And we will really be looking forward to hearing from the communities, specific communities, as we go out to the communities with that local knowledge to apply here. Sorry, was there any questions on that one?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, Director Wilson.
Thank you. Curly, could you, on the objectives, you've said the key objectives include the development of a natural asset framework. What do you actually mean by that? Are we then going to go out and buy stuff, or how do you see you protecting natural assets? Do you have some kind of plan?
Ms. Breen?
Through the chair, this is more complex work. It is underway in the CRD and the RDN. It does evolve. This is the type of work, a framework that would evolve over several years because there's technical reports and information that's required in order to develop it. But it is important work, and it would go hand in hand with the protection of the watersheds. So we seek technical reports being required over time.
Okay, yeah. Follow up, please, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I understand that, and I agree. We need to protect all this stuff. But what I'm talking about here is, does this include us or any of the of the regional districts actually going into the acquisition type of protection business? You see what I mean here?
Through the chair, I mean, certainly that is an option for consideration, and it does happen in some jurisdictions. That's it's a matter of discussion, and it is does require resources.
Follow up, Director Wilson, and I turn to Director Morrison. Thank you. Director Morrison, go ahead, please.
Thank you. So just looking at the language and the wording in this, it seems to be very like ecosystem oriented. But one of the things that I've noticed come up a fair bit in some recent APC meetings I've been at is the desire for current up-to-date wildlife information, as far as, you know, migration patterns for elk and that sort of thing. It's a really tough thing to you know, gather, because you'll have individual developments do their own wildlife assessments, and you know, that's not necessarily connected to the one that may happen 5 years later next door, and sometimes they rely on older assessments, and sometimes APCs want the most current data on migration of different species, the toads, the, you know, that sort of thing. Are we somehow going to be tackling that, or relying on provincial data, or is this even part of this this slide in this component?
Ms. Breen?
Through the chair, I thank you for that question. We certainly found that with adding in the Wake Lake toad into the sensitive ecosystem area protection as just an illustration of the complexity of that, particularly when a development comes in and then the migration of the toad path is averted for those reasons. So it is more complex. We couldn't do this without those considerations, but it does require more technical analysis, and there are things such as, without bringing in a whole new topic, but migration, which species on which list are going to be the priorities. These are the types of conversations that would be involved in the analysis of that. We could do a workshop just on this particular policy area.
Thank you. I turn to Director Kuhn. Go ahead, please.
Just to add what Director Morrison said now, I have a bit of a concern that maybe we will end up spending taxpayers' money on studies or on investigations that should be undertaken by a developer, and I'm just careful about that, because we shouldn't be involved in trying to level the playing field for everybody at the cost of the taxpayer. I think if you have let's say a large subdivision going in somewhere, it is up to them to make sure that everything is done properly. We shouldn't be there doing their work anyway. That's a concern of mine.
Through the chair, the HOCP and the MOCP would, but in the HOCP's case, the entire electoral areas are designated as development approval information area, and those studies are required in new developments by the developer, but it's new development based only.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
I missed? Go ahead.
If you wouldn't mind, please. Thank you. Unless there's somebody else in front of me.
I didn't see anyone. I didn't hear anyone. I have
Yeah.
a small screen and you've spoken up. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Coralie. And I'd like to just go back here again, and this follows up to what Director Kuhn was saying with passing on costs to the taxpayer as far as investigations and all the rest of it. And the same thing applies here to the going back to what it says here with the development of a natural asset framework. If we're going to be doing studies like this, we need to identify the costs that might be involved to us as well, because we're getting this passed down to us all the time, and studies and studies and studies and costs and costs and costs. There are priorities here, but I do feel that there are other priorities which are more important. But so if you could include any kind of costings in that, that would be interesting as well.
Thank you. And have I missed anyone with this slide now? And I'm hoping that we do have Director Nicholson back with us, or she did arrive.
Yes,
I will
I'm
check
here.
my-
I'm
Okay,
here.
great. Oh, good. Okay, thank you. I could have checked my participant panel as well. Go ahead, Ms. Breen.
Thank you. And just through the chair as a comment on that, certainly one of the things that will happen going forward will be cost estimates, but also prioritization and coming back to the directors of what are the priorities. Here are all the things that we could do. Here's what they're going to cost, what should happen first, and in what order. So for sure, that's on our plan going forward. Thank you. Local food production and agriculture systems is we're looking at doing in 2022 and 2023 and 2024 subplans on climate and agriculture area plans will be one of the areas. So certainly food production is one of the key elements in the MOCP.
Can
Any
I
questions
just
here?
a question?
Go ahead.
Thank you through the chair to staff. One of the things I see with the strengthening of the local food production and agriculture systems is that having traveled in New Zealand, I see that they have different methods of agriculture and food production, that they have farmers actually hire businesses or consultants to work with them for rotating their crops and the best and moving of animals and some of the other things, and their water conservation, the systems that they're using. Will this be brought into this area that that we are working? We would like to see the agricultural areas seeking these types of education or ability to have better water conservation and some of those things in this. Thank you.
Ms. Breen?
Through the chair, yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions or hearing no other questions, go ahead.
Through the chair, enhance regional prosperity. We are, we have our manager of economic development is also working in this area. So we've been working closely with him to make sure that we're consistent and with the objectives and policies. And this policy area reflects that as well. So this is you'll remember the industrial land study and the IT study. So those were considered certainly in the development of these policy papers, because we did consult one-on-one with each of the subject matter experts on internal staff in the CVRD. So that's what this policy area reflects. Any questions on that one?
Anyone?
Yeah.
Seeing none, go ahead, please. Oh, who was that? Go ahead.
It's Allison. Is this where we talk about the connectivity issue and the home-based business issue?
Ms. Breen?
Through the chair, certainly home-based businesses, we'll have objectives and we can have some policy, but most of the home-based business work you'll see in the modernized zoning bylaw and the regulations. But there are links in terms of consistency here.
And the connectivity?
And the connectivity, yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Breen.
Through the chair, mitigate and adapt to the climate crisis. We'll be seeing, we're planning for a climate mitigation RFP going into 2020 to address developing our required Local Government Act required greenhouse gas emission targets and reduction. So that will be going forward. There's more stresses than those that are listed here, but that's the plan going forward in terms of the climate crisis. The social equity lens is particularly important here and in terms of policy considerations. But for now, this is a high-level overview on climate. Are there any questions on this one?
Seeing none.
Madam Chair, I had a question on the previous slide. Sorry, I didn't get to you fast enough.
Okay. Okay, go ahead to the previous one, enhance regional prosperity. Go ahead,
So-
Director Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't know whether this slots in here or not, but obviously, in my view, the part of our regional prosperity will be the prosperity of our First Nations neighbors, and as they increase their participation in the economy. And I'm just wondering if there's any room, or if this is an appropriate area for us to be making note of that. I know that there's other areas that are looking to First Nations as suppliers of skilled trades and labor for projects like our hospital and the schools. So has there been any thought given to that as a component of our enhanced regional prosperity?
Ms. Breen.
Thank you, through the chair. Certainly, we've been having discussions about how best to address First Nations in terms of the MOCP. And so we are wanting to go through that consultation when we've started that in the HOCP starting in the fall, and to ask them how they would like to be involved, if they would like to be involved, and how they would like to be presented.
Thank you. Follow up, Director Morrison.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
Can I jump in first? Can I jump in here?
Go ahead.
Go
ahead, Director.
I appreciate Director Morrison's comment, and I think that applies both to the natural asset one too. I think we need to add, maybe even the language needs to be rethought a little bit from a communications point of view on that one. And on the next slide, I had a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I think it would be good from a communications point of view to add stresses, the heat stress, to the list of stresses there as a specific one that we all need to pay more attention to.
Yep, through the chair, thank you. It's a good addition.
Thank you, that's noted. And I think Director Smith has a question.
Yes, through the chair to staff, the RFP that will be coming out for climate mitigation, will we be including the municipalities in that RFP for the area and not just electoral areas?
Through the
Ms.
chair,
Breen?
yes, thank you. Through the chair, staff have already extended invitation to the planning departments in the other municipalities to join us in this. And we've had some interest from Duncan and Ladysmith, and perhaps others when we get closer to it. But yes, generally we would expect a more regional approach on that one.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
No further.
I
Okay,
have
go
a
ahead,
question.
please. Oh, go ahead, Director Kuhn.
Yeah, the water quality and water quantity is, in the end, it is province's responsibility, right?
Ms. Breen?
Through the chair, yes, but we can still consider objectives and policies to improve. And a lot of it actually would be related more in the zoning area in terms of, for example, zones that may reduce the number of uses that have high water use, those types of things. But the OCP would have supportive objectives and policies in that regard.
Could I have another follow-up?
Go ahead.
Yeah, my concern with this whole review here is I'm concerned that and the CVIT has had that tendency, and I think other regional districts do too, to get involved in areas that are really the responsibility of the senior governments, and I'm trying to point out we should try to avoid to get little steps and little steps and little steps to take that responsibility on, because I mean, I wouldn't mind taking that responsibility on, but man, we need money from the senior governments then, and if that doesn't come, I would just be very careful with that, and that also refers to the comment Director Nicholson made earlier. Um, um, that blends into the same area. That's also partially provincial government responsibility, and I have an aversion to us trying to get more and more into the responsibilities of the senior governments. I just want to point that out.
Thank you. Noted. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Breen. One more slide, and we will have a 10-minute break. Go ahead.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I was waving. Probably you couldn't see my
Oh,
hand waving away
sorry.
there.
No,
Yeah.
I couldn't see you. Go ahead, Director Wilson.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in here as far as the water quality and quantity is concerned. Yeah, I agree that it probably is a provincial thing, but it doesn't mean to say that we can't act as stewards for what's going on here. It's this is one of the staples of life, and from what I've seen so far, the province is not living up to its responsibilities. It would be wrong of us to just say not my problem and brush my shoulders away. So, Miss Breen, I would be very grateful if you would continue on this path, get the grants that you need, but protect our water from a local point of view. Certainly don't point to somebody else and say it's your problem.
Thank you. Go ahead, please. Ms. Breen.
All right, thank you. All comments noted, thank you. So through the chair, the last area in policy, and this is probably where we'll be addressing First Nations as well. But again, staff didn't want to include that without undergoing those initial conversations with First Nations. So here's where we're talking, this area is improving governance and implementation. Our alignment with other plans, not just internally, but externally, regionally, building relationships with our municipal partners, with different levels of government, with First Nations, the equitable implementation. So there's the social equity lens. When can we do that, and where is it appropriate, and how do we do that? Monitoring progress, that's the indicators. And then, as I said, the social equity section, which we can do, I guess, after the break.
Okay. Are there any questions on this one? Hearing none, could we take a 10-minute break, come back at 10:15, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are live.
Thank you so much. Welcome back. And Ms. Breen, before you start, I believe Director Morrison has a question. Go ahead, Director Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, can you go back to the, I think it's two back, the environment slide briefly? Ah, yeah, that's it. So I'm looking at the lists there, and just one jumped out at me that doesn't appear to be there, and I don't know how much room we have, but air quality and air shed management, those policies aren't a part of that, and every year, whether it's when we have an inversion in the winter or smoke and high pressure, that's a major priority for residents, and I'm sure in preparation of this you considered that it just not make the cut, or should it be in there? Thank you.
Ms. Breen?
Through the chair, yes, absolutely. I sit on the roundtable for the region, and there is information included in the paper. It just didn't make it as onto the slide, but really but it is there and it should be there. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a question also.
Go ahead, Director Acton.
Thank you. My question is, there was a lot of concern that came up about unloading and taking on jurisdiction of provincial matters. That's not part of our mandate. So I was wondering, is there a way to define our relationship with, in particular, the province in different areas, MOTI, Flynn Row, etc., so that, and if it was defined in here, would it have actually, and they're a referral, would it have more strength in the end for them to support us in getting our needs met?
Ms. Breen.
Through the chair, yes, thank you for the comment and questions. There is sections in here on jurisdiction. There are the federal and provincial at the very beginning of the document, and there is also room here for advocacy policies in that regard, so that it's clearly outlined that it's not within jurisdiction, but the regional board has a say on the matter, and that's where that type of objectives and can go, so that it's telegraphing to those agencies that it's considered by the board and it's important.
So I guess can I follow up, Madam Chair?
Follow up, go ahead.
So the real crux of it is, can that actually strengthen their commitment to support us if we clearly define how we want them to do that? Could it get us even further, just make us stronger?
Ms. Breen.
Through the chair, the board is entitled to have opinions and to advocate to those agencies, and I can't speak for all of those agencies, but I think it helps them when they receive referrals, MOTI, etc., of what the preferences are of the board, and my understanding is that they will consider them when they can.
Follow up, Director Acton? Okay, is there anybody else that I've missed? Go ahead, Ms. Breen.
I have just two other slides here before Emily talks about the engagement and consultation plan. They're kind of new to the modernization, and this is the equity lens. We'll be bringing this forward into the fall workshop for the directors to consider as a lens in policy consideration. There's as an example, since we've just finished the climate change slide, is when the directors are considering, or the board is considering perhaps funding new energy efficiency programs, one consideration is does the energy efficiency program benefit all social spheres, or is it benefiting a social sphere that can afford to purchase that? So those are the types of considerations as priorities, particularly when it comes to budget and a not infinite budget. So those types of things is something that we have interjected, and you'll find it kind of layered through the policy papers. So there is an attachment included in the staff report that kind of outlines each policy area and the types of considerations. This is in itself very much a growing policy area in local governments, and we'll be seeing more and more of this. I know our neighboring regional districts are integrating this into their climate action plans and their OCPs as well. So we're bringing some of those considerations into the development of this in the MOCP. There are areas that could be prioritized, and there are implementation considerations, and we anticipate that this will be part of a robust discussion going forward into the community circles as well.
Hearing or seeing no questions, go ahead, please.
The final attachment on the MOCP policy papers are the indicators. These have been developed through a very extensive review of existing data, external to the CVRD and also within our own, mostly residing in engineering and environment, of data and solid waste, of things that we will continue to monitor going into the future. And we've aligned that available and what we project to be continue to be available data with the objectives and policies. So you'll see that the indicators in the indicator list are aligned specifically with, this is an example here, under those two policy areas, manage infrastructure responsibly, with specific ways to measure the effectiveness of those policies. We're also recommending that the indicators are reviewed in the director's workshop at the end of September. So are there any questions on the indicators?
Yes, I have Director Martman. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair, and through to staff. I'm interested in I like the idea of evidence-based decision-making and monitoring things through numbers, but sometimes it's how you select the numbers that is pretty critical, and also how you define terms. And so I'm interested in whether, like for example, you use the term village node, and I went through all the documents. I'm not sure I ever saw a definition of a village node, and so I'm wondering if that's going to be a sort of a available in a definitions document somewhere. And because to me, if you're going to be doing within a kilometer of it without a definition of what a node is, how do you know where a kilometer is?
Breen?
Through the chair, yes, thank you. Those are astute comments. And you'll find that the growth containment boundaries, when we bring those forward, again, at the director's workshop, we'll have the village node defined, and they will all be defined in that document. And certainly that is the essence of effective indicators or not. So this work has been probably 2 years in the making. A lot of wrestling in terms of what should be included, what can be included, just in terms of data and availability. And also a lot that we left on the cutting room floor, because I think in the development of this, we all agreed that it should be limited in terms of how many there are, that they should be able to be easily measured on a regular basis, mostly through staff. So those are the types of considerations we'll explain in September, but certainly there was a lot of intellectual teasing out in the development of these.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else on that? Seeing none, go ahead, please, Ms. Breen.
Right,
No,
I'm going
Ms.
to.
Go ahead, it's Ms. Dixon's now. She's taking over. I see she just popped up.
I'll just work her slides for her.
Okay.
Thank you,
Welcome,
Coralie.
Ms. Welcome.
Thank you, and through the chair. I'm really excited to be able to talk to you guys about the engagement and consultation plan that we're putting forward today. As you are all very well aware, this is a ton of information. And so the trick is, how are we going to explain this and engage on this with the general public? And so there's a few things in here that I'm personally very excited to talk to you about today, and I'll keep it relatively brief, but certainly open to questions in the next couple of slides. So first and foremost, and it's been mentioned before, how are we going to consult with the First Nations? Obviously, it's a very important part of this plan going forward and throughout the project. The answer is that it's going to be early and it's going to be ongoing. And so not only do we have a legal requirement to consult with the First Nations, but we are obligated as neighbors to speak government to government on how we can coordinate and collaborate on certain projects and help each other going forward. And so that like I said, is going to be early and ongoing, and we look forward to coming back with you and on some more details about that. The big piece of this puzzle going forward is going to be the community circles. And you all, I believe, have heard a little bit about the community circles and what they are. Those will be beginning as well as the First Nations consultation, which has already started a little bit, but the community circles will be starting this winter, and we're really excited about it. And the next slide will have a little bit more on that. We'll just stay on this slide if you can, Coralie, for a moment, but I'll get into a little bit more information on the community circles in the next one. But so a few of the new and exciting tools for this communication plan. Of course, the videos that you've all seen have had huge success on our website and in the public. We have been fortunate enough to work with the same producer on those videos to make a couple new videos, and one is on the community circles, which has just finished, so we will be circulating that as soon as we can. And what that video is just an explanation of what the community circles are, and to get people really enticed to host one themselves and excited for them. The other one is the transect video, which you've all seen by now, which is another great one. And then in addition to those two videos, we are collaborating with the same producer on some short videos on the 8 policy areas and going into a little bit of detail on those, which is going to be really exciting. Now, those short videos are meant specifically, and this is something that I'm really excited about, for Instagram, which is going to be launching today. The Land Use Services Department, we've been working really heavily on getting that up and going, which is going to launch today at 5 o'clock. And we hope for your support in that and to share it with your friends and family. So those videos will be featured as highlights on that account, which, as I'm sure everyone is aware, is a bit of a younger demographic, which is another demographic that we are specifically targeting, if I can say that, in this plan. As part of the outreach and the engagement that we did on phase 1 of this project, one thing that we really noticed is that we're missing the mark on getting our younger demographics out to engagement events. So by being more present on social media, on all sorts of different platforms, and Instagram is the newest one, we're hoping to really engage and get those people out. The next one, and the name is a little bit funny, and we don't mean this literally, but you might want to bang the table figuratively once you hear what it's going to do and once you can see its power. But it is going to be replacing place speak. So we've heard in the past that place speak has not been the tool of choice for many local governments, and specifically with the CVRD, we haven't had the greatest feedback both at this committee level and with the public. So we've done some research, and we're happy to say that we've received approval to use Bang the Table. It's an online engagement platform that's very intuitive to use. It's really exciting. It's fun, it's new, and many local governments across Canada, the UK, the US, Australia are using this program, and we internally in community planning are very, very excited to get that going. In addition to those exciting things, we are going to be advertising the community circles via newspaper ads, which we've done in the past, as well as radio. So reaching out to different demographics there as well. You'll hear us live, which is very exciting. In addition to that, we'll be working with a graphic artist to design posters, which we hope to have up in different community halls and different markets and local vendors and that sort of thing. Really, again, just engaging more folks that way. And then I've already mentioned social media, so make sure you follow CVRD Land Use launching today. Corley, if you could just head to the next slide. So the community circles.
I had a question. Sorry, I had a hand up, Ms. Dixon. Go ahead, Director
yep.
Salmon.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Emily. So I just heard you say we'll be hearing us live on the radio. Is that staff live on the radio or directors? Or sounds great.
Right, through the chair. What I mean by live on the radio is that I guess it won't be live in real time, but it'll be either our voices or the radio voices. So when you're driving your car listening to music, you can hear an ad for community circles.
So I think it could be quite effective. Great, thank you.
Director Martman.
Thank you, Chair, and through to staff. Thanks for this, and I'm so looking forward to this. I do have some concerns about the reaching out into our area, and I don't know if you have familiar with it. We have no newspaper. We don't take radio. We have no social media. No. It's just really difficult to get information out because of not having some of the standard media in this area. So I'm wondering if just make a note of how we might do that effectively here. Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you. Yeah, those are great comments, and it's certainly one that we're well aware of in doing the research for the newspaper ads specifically. And yeah, we've been aware of that from the past, but we'll definitely keep that on the books. And I'm sure between Corley and I, we can think of some creative ways to reach the people of Area H.
Through the chair to staff.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Director Martman and Area H and Area G are both very non-newspaper. Unfortunately, the newspaper comes and it has more ads than it has actual content, and most people don't bother reading it anymore because of that. One of the area magazines or newspaper items that is definitely read page to page is the Take 5. So I would recommend that you include the Take 5 as it brings in Area H and Area G. Not all Area G receives it, but that's a possibility also. I'm really excited to see the Bang the Table. I've participated in multiple workshops with Bang the Table, and I really find that they're really up group and they're really supportive of you. So this will definitely be an improvement for us. As for Instagram and reaching a younger group, that's great, but my demographics are on the other side of the younger side. So then that also brings an issue in when you have the demographics that are a bit higher up in age. And I hope that we're also looking at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Smith.
Madam Chair,
Yeah,
thank you.
I will put you, you would like to go on the speakers list? I have Director Morrison, and then I'll put you
Oh,
on,
thank
Director
you.
Acton. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Morrison, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know how practical something like this would be, but I certainly know where you could access literally thousands of a younger demographic, and it would be any Saturday or Sunday at in the town of Lake Cowichan, with people getting ready to jump on flotation devices and to scoot down the river. Literally thousands of people every weekend, and I don't know whether we need to get one of those trailered illuminated signs, or have folks obviously handing out pamphlets at when people are about to go tubing isn't a good idea. But there, we're going to have to be innovative, just like our colleagues in G&H. There's we're going to have to think outside the box to get the people on this, and so I throw that out there a little bit in jest, but somewhat or half seriously too, because we're just not going to get the under 39 group by putting newspaper ads in, and I like some of the new ways you're going. So thanks.
Thank you. Director Acton, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I guess it's along all the same lines, but I'm hoping that Ms. Dixon will reach out to us, because even in our area, MOTI has offered that we can use their light board on the side of the road in different areas, like Director all of you have mentioned. There's lots of creative ways, and I think this is this is an area that I really am interested in, and we have a lot of community groups here. We're quite organized with high numbers of contacts, so I hope that we can help provide some of those ideas in our local newspapers, and really do a really good job at getting the word out. So I hope you can reach out to us. Thanks.
I think with the South End directors, we have the South Cowichan News that is mailed to mailboxes. That is, just another one. But that information has been taken, and I turn now back to Ms. Dixon. Go ahead.
Thank you for all those comments, and duly noted for sure. I think they're all great ideas, and we certainly want to get creative with this second phase, because this is kind of where the boots hit the ground, so to speak. And I personally get a lot of joy from seeing all demographics at our events, and so with the ongoing public health pandemic and concerns around that still, we're certainly having to be a little bit more creative in the ways that we reach folks, and so any ideas are very much welcomed. Getting into a little bit more detail about the community circles, this was our way of, I should back up a sec. When we first went to phase one engagement prior to the pandemic, what we heard from folks who participated in those events, those open houses, were that they wanted opportunity to meet in a more personalized way. And so the community circles is a great way to do that, because it's literally meeting with folks who friends, family, or just community groups that you've already established, and talking about the 8 policy areas or anything else that you think needs to be on the table in this discussion. And so the CVRD plans staff in community planning plans to lead a few of those circles in each of the electoral areas, just to give folks the opportunity to be included if they don't have a circle or would rather participate with staff there present. So those circles will be focused more on the local area plans as well as the 8 policy areas. So we'll be doing 2 of those in at least in each of the electoral areas. And then the rest will be resident led. And so this is where a lot of the advertising efforts will go to, is to get people involved and excited about the community circles and in hosting their own. And now, so we won't, our idea isn't to kind of just ask people to do this and not offer any support. So we have put our minds together and created a toolkit for the community circles that are going to be community led. And what those would include a number of documents, one of which would be a workbook to sort of write their comments in to this workbook to then offer back to staff so that we can collect all those ideas and create an ideas book. So that ideas book, the idea there is that it would inform the modernized official community plan and be a real voice for the community in one document. In addition to that, our idea is to have an ideas fair where we can all collectively come together, hopefully face to face, and share those ideas and really talk amongst the community and really create a vision going forward for the draft MOCP. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Director Smith and Director Salmon. Go ahead, Director Smith.
Through the chair to staff, I'm just wanting for a little bit more clarification. So there seem to be community circles that are going to start in the fall, and then more community circles that are going to be in January. Are the community circles that are in the fall for the MOCP, and then in January the community circles are for the LAP and neighborhood? Are they sort of like 2 separate areas when the meetings are taking place? Can you clarify that? And I may have a follow-up. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Dixon.
Through the chair, thank you for that question. I might not have been clear. The idea with the timeline is that we will do the advertising for the community circles starting this fall. There's quite a bit of work that has to go into that prior to us going live, and we've started on a bit of that already. So the community circles, we are hopeful that they can start January of next year. And in those circles, we're welcoming people to discuss the local area plans as well as the policy areas, or really anything that they want to talk about. So it doesn't need to be one or the other. It doesn't need to be both, but we're just hoping to hear feedback.
Follow up, Director Smith. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I think it's a little confusing on this slide because it's saying that it launches in the fall of 2021 and starts in 2022. So I think that it's a little confusing as to what exactly launches in the fall and what exactly starts in 2022 on this slide. And I'm not sure if I looked at that community circle primer that's in our package, whether it's clarified in there or not. I think that the community circles are great. Is there an opportunity for directors to be trained as a facilitator and to also receive like the toolkit and the workbook and have the opportunity to attend all the community circles for their area? Has that been also put into this community circle situation?
Through the chair. So thank you for the comment on the slide. We can certainly change that before we go live on the website with the presentation. Again, the launching will be the advertising, launching the advertising, and then hopefully starting the actual circles, meeting people in groups in 2022. So insofar as the facilitator training, thank you for bringing that up because I missed that point, but staff will also be holding facilitation workshops for each of the facilitators just to go over sort of some best practices for facilitation, because it can be challenging at times, but just to offer support in that way, we will be offering those facilitation workshops. I don't see an issue with directors wanting to participate in those workshops if you would like to, and then certainly with the toolkits, that information will be circulated to all of the directors as well. And then I might just ask Coralie if she wants to talk about having directors at these events or not. Our goal certainly is to have the public and the community's voices be the priority at these events, but I'm not sure if Coralie maybe has some thoughts there that she'd like to add.
You're muted, Court. I'm having some issues because I'm on here twice.
I'd like to comment after Ms. Breen.
Noted. Go ahead.
That's for me. Okay.
Yes.
So I certainly can understand Director Smith's.
You hear me?
Yeah,
Hello?
let's let Coralie go ahead then.
Hello?
Go ahead, Coralie.
My apologies. Through the chair, the directors are welcome to attend any of the community circles.
My turn, Director Yanni, or Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
So yeah, I could certainly understand the desire to attend and observe and listen, but would strongly urge the directors to not want to step into facilitation roles. We're the decision makers, and you know, I know that when I even attend APC meetings, I can inadvertently and subconsciously you know, influence the direction that a committee might go, and so I think that from it's good for us to enhance our skills and learn about the facilitation process and the likes. But you know, when it comes to the actual events, especially if you know, in person, you know, we should be observers and taking in the comment and the input from our public, and not necessarily being in a position of coordinating and subconsciously maybe even directing it. So I think that we should all be clear that it's probably a good idea to be in attendance and to hear what is being provided as far as comment goes, but not to be in a position where we're leading it. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I've got computer issues. So could we take
There is some speech duplication going on there.
5 minutes break? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are live.
Thank you. Sorry for that interruption. A little bit of problem with my computer, and go ahead, Ms. Dixon. And if there was any more questions, could someone tell me where if there was anybody that had their hands up or wished to speak on this?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair. So yeah, just on the community circles, I'm interested in the virtual versus in person. I'm assuming we're thinking we'll be going back to in person when we're allowed, but also I'm just wondering if we've considered now that people are all used to virtual, whether there's some sort of hybrid format that we can do to try to also not lose people that wouldn't come out to meetings in person. So I'm interested in comments on that.
Go ahead, Ms. Dixon.
Thank you through the chair. Yeah, definitely. And this is another reason that we wanted to do the community circles, is that they can be done either in person or online, whatever people are comfortable with. The idea is for the staff-led ones to be in person, and we're hopeful that that can happen when the time comes, as things keep progressing positively. But certainly we wanted to acknowledge that some folks might not be comfortable meeting in person, and so that to offer them an opportunity to still meet as a community and to facilitate one of these circles, that the option is still very much there to do an online version.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Do I have anyone else? Seeing none, go ahead, Ms. Dixon.
I will actually pass it over to Ms. Breen if there are no other questions. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Breen.
All right, thank you through the chair. This is a recap of what we've been talking about this morning in terms of the potential agenda lineup for the directors workshop in late September. We're actually looking at September 29th. So the MOCP policy papers, the growth containment boundaries, the social equity lens paper, the indicators, the new mapping, and that GIS would present this. Community circles more in depth, and then a discussion on the amenity policy. So that's the potential agenda, should the directors agree to that, for September 29th. Also attached in your package, and we won't go through this today, but this is for your review later, is kind of what's on the books in terms of what we're working on, and in community planning, the bylaws, and the potentially when we would be bringing those forward to the directors, and also the policies, which Garnett will be talking about shortly, in terms of those that we're recommending rescindment or new policies. And then also on the very bottom in yellow, so the MOCP is coded throughout this timeline in yellow, are working on supporting plans or part of the MOCP schedules, the RFP on local and neighborhood plans, which would be going out this summer, and then Schedule C, a variety of DPAs that would require more updating, a marine plan, climate plan that I mentioned today, and I also mentioned the agriculture local plan. So there's a summary for your review later. And then finally, without reading out all of the recommendations, but the recommendations in front of you today are, first of all, to consider recommending to the board a rescinding second reading of bylaw 4270, which the board gave in December of 2020. And the reason why we're recommending that is because of all the changes that we outlined today to you verbally, and also those attached to your package. So the second one is to agree that the plan's amended as outlined in the staff report today, which includes the attachments. Third, to forward to the board consideration of second reading as amended, 4270. It's a requirement under the Local Government Act to consider that an OCP is consistent with the CVRD's 5-year financial and solid waste management plans, which it is. So that would be the fourth one. 5, to go to public hearing, direction to go to public hearing. 4329, you've already given, the board's already given second reading. Today, we're recommending consideration of third and final. And just to refresh your memory, this one allows administratively CVRD to move DP guidelines from the OCP into the modernized zoning bylaw. The next one is that a public hearing be held for 4330. The board has already given second reading to this, and this is zoning bylaw harmonization consistency with bylaw 4270. If there's questions on that, Ali can speak to that momentarily. The next one is, and I will read this one out. This recommendation is saying that in respect of any official community plan amendment bylaw that has already been prepared and that would be incapable of being adopted if bylaw number 4270 is adopted, that the board would authorize staff to revise the amendment bylaw prior to presentation to the board for third reading or adoption to the extent permitted by the Local Government Act, Section 471B, and required to enable the board to adopt the bylaw as an amendment to the new OCP, meaning that any potential OCP amendment would be consistent with bylaw 4270 in terms of designation names as opposed to the current OCP. That's in essence what it's saying. That the communications and engagement plan be approved, that Emily just presented and is attached to the staff report. And the final one, in alignment with all of the other modernization that I spoke to briefly earlier on in the presentation, is to direct staff to prepare a report on recommendations to potentially amend the CVRD bylaw 3544 Advisory Planning Commission Establishment Bylaw. So those are the recommendations for today, and that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, Ms. Garnett, was she going to, did she want to be able to speak, or she's just ready on side for any questions?
Through the chair, she's ready, available for any questions.
Okay, so I'm turning to the committee if we want to go through the recommendations one at a time or as a block, and I turn to Director Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll sort of revisit my comments at the beginning of this, and that we've gone through a huge ingredients list, and I know that it's been packaged in the recommendations that are before us, and I've done an awful lot of reading, and I think I'm a pretty quick study, but I just don't know that that proceeding on these right now is it necessary, I guess, is the first question. Do we need to do this today? And I'm also cognizant of the fact that if we there's probably risks in not proceeding today, and that we'll all have to be refamiliarized with this if we were to do it at a later date. So can you sort of give us the pros and cons from your perspective, Ms. Breen, on the necessity of doing this today, and if we still have flexibility to consider this further, I guess. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Breen.
Through the chair, the directors have absolute flexibility, and in terms of whether or not to proceed with any or some of these recommendations today. If the directors feel that they would like additional information, particularly with respect to the mapping changes, which I think was raised earlier. We can certainly arrange to have that as part of either a special ESC, forthcoming ESC, or the regular meeting. So we could do that, perhaps even in July, and then bring the recommendations, advance them again. That's one possibility.
Follow up, Director Morrison. I turn to Director Kuhn.
I'm good.
Go ahead, Director Kuhn.
Yes, I have the same concerns as Director Morrison. This is an incredible amount of information that we're facing here, and is it possible? Would it be possible for staff to come up with this is how it is now, and this is what we're changing it into, kind of a condensed version, so we can see at one glance, okay, this is what we have now. This is what we're going to have in the future. So that I feel a little bit insecure about making decisions now on this, because quite frankly, I find the information just too much to condense or to absorb. And if there's any way for staff to condense this whole thing in a way that in a presentation to say, okay, here's why we're doing this. This is what we have now. I don't know if it is possible, so I'm just putting it out there.
Ms. Breen?
Yeah, certainly, through the chair. The main changes outlined were in 4270 in terms of Schedule A text content was through the agriculture designation. Those were the main changes. Otherwise, it is the mapping changes, which you had an overview today, but certainly we haven't had a presentation on that. So staff would recommend that we could come back with a high-level overview reviewing those external referral comments and give a presentation on mapping.
So am I hearing that 1 through 5 you want to refer back, and we would need to move on 6 to 10? I'm looking to committee. That's what I'm seeing, because we need to, I think, the communication part. And so go ahead.
Through the chair, I wouldn't support moving number 10 at this time. I think we need to understand what this actually means to our APCs, and that we need our APCs as we move through all of this. And if it was amalgamating the APCs, that would be definitely taking our local area plans out of the APCs. So I think that we would want to withhold anything moving and changing our APCs at this time. So I wouldn't support number 10. So having read all the materials, and I know we've all struggled through this, because so many papers you end up getting lost along the way. And I'm just going to try and put it into my own words so that maybe Ms. Breen can make sure that I've got it in my head correctly. So we have bylaw 4270, and we had authorized it earlier, but there has been some changes, and so we're amending it, and we're creating bylaw 4330, and that will now include bylaw 4329, which was bringing up to date some of the revision bylaws that have gone through between our original authorization of 4270 that will now be brought into 4330. Am I halfway there? maybe?
Ms. Breen.
Through the chair. So bylaw 4270 has been given, the HOCP, that's 4270, has been given second reading by the board in December of 2020. The recommendations are, the first 5 are related to that bylaw. That bylaw number is not changed. It's still, the HOCP it's bylaw 4270. Because there have been the number of changes that they're not just administrative changes. The act requires us to rescind second reading, which basically means let's take it away. The second one is saying now the board is agreeing that all of the amendments are okay. We agree with those amendments. So we're going to do that. We agree with them. We'll amend it as staff has presented. And then the third one is basically giving it second reading again. It's like a brand new, clean second reading. So it's almost like, in a way, the first one didn't happen. But so 4270 is staying 4270. That's the HOCP. Nothing's changing. And the fourth one is required under the Act. It's just for consistency, making sure the OCP is consistent with the financial and solid waste plans. And then the public hearing is what is required. 4329 and 4330 are separate bylaws. They stand on their own. The board has already given second reading to both of those bylaws. Staff is recommending that 4329 advance to third reading. That's an administrative bylaw. It is just, in essence, saying that the DPA guidelines could, they don't have to be, but they could, or some or all of them, be moved into the modernized zoning bylaw at some point later. That's all it's authorizing. 4330 is bringing the existing zoning bylaws into consistency with 4270, the HOCP. So no changes in those two. We're just advancing them. One into third reading because it's administrative, it doesn't require a public hearing, which is 4329. And 4330, we're recommending advance to public hearing along with 4270 because it made sense for the two to go together. So they, the bylaw numbers, nothing's being included in any, and 4329 and 4330 stand on their own, and 4270, the number hasn't changed. All that's changing there is that there are amendments to the text and to the mapping. And I should say too, for the document that is there that outlines the APC comments, it is included for transparency purposes, but those comments for public hearing, they're intended to be advanced along with public hearing. Those comments have been received by the APCs for 2 years. Most of those comments in there are not reflective of the last referral period for the APCs. And at the top of the document, it does say that it was amended at that time. So the main changes to the content, again, are the agriculture designation because of the ALC and the MOA referral. And then the mapping changes, which GIS staff did to reflect previous board directions. One on the Madrone study, which was a board direction from 2018, the wildfire studies, board direction from 2019, and the recent environmental reports on the dams and the flood management. Those 5, or actually there are 7 technical reports. The board directed staff to update the OCPs to include that comment. So it's new information, but they all have been board directed in terms of information that should be updated in the OCP. And I hope that helps a bit.
question.
Director Morrison, then Director Salmon. Director Morrison, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Breen. I'm an auditory learner, and that explanation that you just gave us has made this more clear than it's been throughout all the reading of the documents and the discussion. So that helps a lot. I'm still sort of, as Director Cooper said, a little uncertain about proceeding at this moment, but it's, as I say, it's clear for me now that it's been through all the reading of the documentation. I don't know that I want to say, yes, let's proceed right now, but if we weren't to proceed right now, I'd like to proceed, in the month of July to making these recommendations, whether or not it actually gets to the board before our August break. So there's that. I'd like to process this and to consider this a little bit longer before we actually make that recommendation to the board. But I do also have a question for, I don't know whether it'd be for you or Ms. Chirelf, but in the transition, what impacts will these have on the stream of applications that are coming in? We obviously have to, we're basing everything off of the laws that we have in place today. And until they're adopted, they don't come into force. And so I'm assuming that we have a whole bunch of applications that are being processed on the basis of the laws that we have in place, and that we will, when we get to that adoption time, is there going to be any work plan or hiccups as a result of this, or is there going to be any are we expecting any rush to get applications in under the old bylaws, anything like that?
Ms. Breen.
Through the chair, so the 8th recommendation today is attempting to address that by having the board recognize that this transition period, and having planning staff consider new applications under 4270. So that's what that recommendation is addressing, and that could still be considered today in that regard. I can say that the planners and development services have been very good to address, new applications and invite comments from us in community planning in terms of OCP amendments, particularly. What designation would it be in the new HOCP, that type of thing. So certainly those conversations are happening between development services and community planning at this time. But that recommendation then brings it into a new vein, because the planning staff reports would be written slightly differently from development services.
Is there a follow-up? Follow-up, Director Morrison? Okay, go ahead. I need Director Salmon.
Yeah, thank you. So 2 questions really. One, so the admin bylaw where we're moving the development permit guidelines, well, why are we doing that right now?
Through the chair. So
go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. To clarify, it wouldn't happen right now. It's an administrative bylaw. It allows the movement of those guidelines, some of them, when appropriate, into the new modernized zoning bylaw. Now, in some DP guidelines, and I'll give the example of form and character. There's 4 different provisions under the Act for 4 different types of form and character. They may be more suitable as, because remember, DP guidelines sit almost between policy and regulatory. They have this quasi, a hybrid kind of identification. They may provide more clarity to the public to be in the zoning bylaw, along with in the particular, for example, residential zones or industrial zones or commercial zones, as the case may be. So it allows it to happen. It certainly at this point in time, we would not be ready for that to happen. It's just simply allows that to happen at the right time in the right place.
Okay, thank you, because I'm aware that we're maybe on our later meeting today, we're looking at the development procedures. That change, or first look at that. So okay, I won't go on. Could I have a follow-up, Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
So I just generally, I think I'd aligned with waiting a little bit on the ones that can for a meeting later in July. And I'd follow Ms. Breen's, I think you suggested mapping might be later. So yeah, I'd look for, I don't know if that means we're trying to do 1 through 5 plus 8 now, or how lost I am on that.
Okay, well, that's what I'm looking to the committee. There is 10 recommendations here. Which ones do I go one at a time through the 10? Or is there a referral for the whole thing? Is there, I mean, I'm looking for direction, and we have a recommendation in front of us that we need to address. Director Morrison.
Just to test the house, I'd move the 10 items be referred to the next regular meeting of Electoral Area Services on July 21st.
It's been moved. I don't see a seconder, but I don't see everyone. So is there a seconder? Sorry?
Madam Chair, I've been trying to get my hand up, but obviously you haven't been able to see it. So I
No.
don't know if I want to speak before the seconder or not. So
I do not have a seconder.
okay.
So I'm looking for a seconder. There's a,
Can we lower the presentation?
Okay.
I second it.
okay. Well, they'll have the recommendations. Everyone's got the recommendations in their agenda, so the 10. So it has been moved and seconded that this be referred back to the next July Electoral Area Services meeting. Am I correct with that? It's been moved and seconded. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Motion is defeated.
Excuse me, could you
Sorry.
just can you just reread that? I want to the motion. I would like to hear it again.
Go ahead, Ms. Harrison. I thought I had it right, but maybe I didn't.
Okay, well.
The recommendation before you is that it be moved and seconded, that recommendation for staff report from Community Planning Division regarding HOCP, MOCP update number 1 to 10 be referred to the next regular Electoral Area Services Committee on July 21st, 2021.
So that has been moved and seconded. I will call the question again. Is everyone clear? And I see everyone now. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried that goes to July 21st. Moving on now to R2, or I know it's been, I recognize it's been another hour, but it's 11:22. Let's go to 11:30. R2, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R2 is a report from the Community Planning Division regarding CVRD non-conforming dwellings policy 1991. And the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that the CVRD non-conforming dwellings policy 1991 be rescinded.
Been moved. Second. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Thank you so much. Moving on now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R3 is a report from the Community Planning Division regarding CVRD letters of comfort for non-conforming siting policy 1994. And the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that CVRD letters of comfort for non-conforming siting policy 1994 be rescinded.
Moved. Seconder. Second. Is there any questions? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R4 is a report from the Community Planning Division regarding CVRD Modular and Mobile Homes Policy 2009. And the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that the CVRD Modular and Mobile Homes Policy 2009 be rescinded.
Moved. There's second. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion's carried. Thank you. R5, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R5 is a report from Community Planning Division regarding CVRD Short-Term Rental of Single-Family Dwellings Policy 2012. And the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that the CVRD Short-Term Rental of Single-Family Dwellings Policy 2012 be rescinded.
Moved. Second. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Thank you. R6, please. I mean, where are we? R6.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R6 is the report from the Community Planning Division regarding CVRD Seasonal Cabins Policy 2017. And the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that CVRD Seasonal Cabins Policy 2017 be rescinded.
Moved. Is there a second or second? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion's carried. R7, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R7 is a report from the Community Planning Division regarding CVRD Manufactured Home Park Bylaw number 4367 and Redevelopment Policy Policy 2021. And the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board, 1, that the revised Manufactured Home Park Redevelopment Policy be approved. Number 2, that CVRD Bylaw number 4367, Manufactured Home Park Bylaw 2021, be forwarded to the board for consideration of first and second reading. And number 3, that the public hearing for Bylaw number 4367 be waived in accordance with sections 4642 and 467 of the Local Government Act.
Looking for a mover? Is there not a mover or a seconder? It's in limbo. Okay, there's a mover, there's a seconder. Questions? Go ahead, Director Smith.
Okay, this one for me is really emotional, considering everything that happened in the Saltaire Trailer Park. And I think that based on the CVRD's wording in this bylaw, where it says rezone is a definite hurdle that was worked around by a developer, that instead of having to rezone, he was able to take an affordable housing component, the one and only manufactured home park zone in Saltaire. He managed to then turn it into a high density stick built on manufactured home tiny lots buildings that are now valued at over $770,000. I'm not sure that this document actually protects the people that are in the manufactured home parks throughout all the electoral areas. Mine's gone, it's gone, and it turned out horrendous for those involved. And we had people who had to go through bankruptcy because their mobile homes were not movable. They didn't qualify to fit into another park. What other parks are actually out there? And people fell off removing their Joey Shack and had brain damage. This was not a good result from a bylaw that was under the CVRD. We must make sure that the bylaw is actually written to protect the people in there. You know, referring to the Provincial Manufactured Home Park Tenancy Act, that is easily worked around. In the end, this fellow said, I'm going to live, one of the developers said, I'm going to live in the house that's on that property. So that's how he was able to remove all the tenants. And then he turned around and said, oh, no, now it's a manufactured home park a year or so later. So the Tenancy Act doesn't really protect the people to the best that should be protected. We talk about affordable housing multiple times within every single meeting. We talk about, you know, looking at things through an equity lens. This is huge for us in our communities. And so I can't support the bylaw the way it's written at this time. I think we need to have a deeper dive into it to ensure that every T and I are dotted and crossed and that we're out there protecting this most amazing affordable housing component that is in electoral areas. So at this point, I think we need to have a deeper dive, and I won't support the motion on the floor at this time.
Mr. Tippett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hello to the committee.
Welcome.
Thanks. Yes, I hear what the director for Saltaire, Director Smith, is saying, and she's right. It was a terrible situation. The main problem in that situation in Saltaire was the way that the zone was written. Actually, it permitted at the same time in the same zone single-family dwelling and mobile home park. This is a problem that we don't have in other electoral areas. In fact, looking at the South Cowichan zoning bylaw that was written a little bit after, well, probably 10 years after the Saltaire zoning bylaw, they actually separated mobile home parks into two separate zones, one where they have already been subdivided and another zone where it's just rental mobile homes, and single family dwellings simply not a permitted use in those zones. So we you know, the real problem there was just the nature of the zone, and it was unique to Area G. I'm not sure why it was written that way, but that just is how it was. So first of all, I think the precedent is unlikely to be repeated because of the way our other zones for mobile home parks are designed. And secondly, I'd say when the modernized zoning bylaw is implemented, it will certainly follow the South Cowichan model, I think, where we're going to not only not permit single family dwellings in mobile home park zones, but also separate ones that are subdivided versus not subdivided, because another issue could be if someone's renting a pad and then the owner of the mobile home park decides to stratify a bare land strata, which is permitted in some of our older mobile home park zones, that can create itself displacement problems because some renters wouldn't qualify for a mortgage. So we're aware of that. We're doing everything we can in our power under the zoning regulations to make sure it doesn't happen again. I can't really speak specifically to the policy concern that was expressed here, but that's a little background for the committee's consideration.
Thank you so much. Follow up, Director Smith.
Yes, a follow-up in regards to a different question. So it says manufactured home, the definition means a dwelling unit manufactured in a factory, transported to a manufactured home park and installed and used as a residence. We now see that manufactured homes in a factory are very different than a single wide and a double wide. If you look at the Pacific Home prefab homes, they're manufactured in a factory. The Nexus Modular Solutions, they're manufactured in a factory. Cube Solutions, they're manufactured in a factory. So there's many more I could quote. And these are manufactured homes in a factory. And so it doesn't say single wide or double wide. And so it's not clear and it's open for interpretation. And I think that that's one thing that we need to have clarified in this bylaw. And, you know, I'm also looking at the common property that, you know, sometimes that is, you know, is the boundaries a buffer of 7.5 meters. Is that then common property and can be used by all, or is it encroachment available by the pad user? And another thing that I have concerns about is the on-site sewage should not be in the buffer area, and that there's odors for the adjacent properties. Quite often the adjacent property is a residential lot or a couple of lots, and they now have 30 manufactured homes plastered close within the 7.5 meter buffer. And to have a septic system or a sewage system that's right again close to their property in that buffer zone, I don't think that's an appropriate area. I think it needs to be definitely beyond the 7.5 buffer zone. So,
Is there any staff that wish to answer any of that? Mr. Tippett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, those are good comments, fair comments. I think the one caveat I would have is that with respect to septic systems, I don't know that we have concurrent jurisdiction with the province on it, because there's a professional reliance model that's in play now. So we could potentially try and write in our mobile home park bylaw, for example, a regulation that makes it clear that the buffer is intended to be a buffer and nothing but that, including for sewage. But it's possible that under the provincial authority granted to the professionals who sort of permit sewage systems, that they might not have to pay attention to that. But good points all around, and we will definitely be rewriting our mobile home park bylaw. Just on a technical note, about say 20 to 30 years ago, probably more like 30 years ago, it was a much clearer distinction between single and double wide mobile homes. The CSA certifications for those were very distinctive as well. Like Z240 was, for example, truly a mobile home. It was on a chassis. It was not meant to be mounted on a foundation on the ground. And then there was the A277 standard for homes that were in factory built but intended to be put on a foundation. So in other words, permanent, really, not really mobile. The problem is that the CSA has kind of blended some of these standards these days, and so it becomes fairly hard to sort of pigeonhole things like that. We have tended to key our own definitions to the CSA standards, and as they've evolved, it's become more difficult. But I hear the point, and I think the important point is maybe in a rental mobile home park situation, we should not be encouraging permanent type foundation structures to be erected there, because then they're not mobile anymore. And so we'll take a look at those issues when we're rewriting the zoning and the mobile home park bylaw.
Thank you. I turn to Director. I have a speakers list: Martman, Salmon, Wilson, and Morrison. Go ahead, Director Martman.
Thank you, Chair, and through to staff. Thank you very much for some of the documents that support this item on the agenda. Particularly the table of changes, and I'll just refer to that because I have a question under on page 7 of it, where it talks about the adequate steps taken by the owner to exterminate vermin and keep it park free of vermin, and also around flammable debris and rubbish. And it says it's outside of the scope of Section 298. I'm interested in their, is that an opinion, or did that come out of a legal case? Because when I read it, Section 298, it talks about the ability of regional districts over the maintenance of mobile home parks, and this seems to be a maintenance area.
Ms. Garnett.
Thank you for the question. And through the chair, this has been advice we have received through a professional review of this bylaw.
Follow up, Director Martman.
So I take it it's outside this this idea of maintenance of a mobile home park is something I'll be interested to know what the definition then of maintenance is.
Ms. Garnett?
Yeah, thank you. That's certainly something that I can look into more when we bring this back about what the particular definition of that would be. This was quite clear in the in our review that regulating vermin was outside of the scope of the bylaw itself. But where that line is, we can definitely come back with more information on that.
Follow up, Director Martman?
If I may, and just add some fun into this, then we're talking about four-legged vermin here.
Could be two.
Yes, that is my
Yes, we are.
understanding.
Yeah. Director Salmon?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I'm sort of sympathetic to Director Smith on the importance of, from the affordable housing point of view. And I know here in Area A, there's a lot of development pressure, and we have maybe, the significant source of affordable housing in our Spectacle Lake Mobile Home Park or Cedar Creek Mobile Home Park. So I don't feel I've totally absorbed what we're really doing here yet. And I'm wondering, I think I'm not yet comfortable supporting this, but could it be referred to APCs for some, at least, discussion? And I really value what they would have to say. So I'm not sure if that's possible, but staff comment on that would be welcome.
Ms. Garnett?
Thank you. And sure, it's definitely possible to do that. At this point, we haven't recommended referrals to APCs because the nature of the changes to the bylaw itself was really to delete ultra-virus content, update the references to legislation. The bulk of the actual regulations with regards to setbacks and citing, that has all been retained. That's not changed. And likewise, we've retained the regulations related to servicing. So it's really just been a general update because the bylaw is from 1978. And with respect to the policy itself, this policy, the previous policy would have only applied in situations when there was a rezoning application received by the board, and the board was in a position of a discretionary approval over a rezoning application. And the bylaw has, or the policy has always been intended to protect the rights of tenants of a manufactured home park, but only at a time of redevelopment to go along with a rezoning application, because that is when the board can weigh in on things. And the changes to the policy are to clarify the CVRD board's role. The previous policy implied that the CVRD could require the relocation of tenants of a manufactured home park. The revised policy is really intended to state that the CVRD can require information about the relocation. We cannot require the actual relocation to occur. It's outside the board's authority. And in my opinion, the new policy actually provides more thorough and clear requirements that would support that information. But it's outside the scope to actually require the relocation to occur.
Follow up, Director Salmon?
Yeah, thank you. That's a start. That does help. I'm still just cautious, and I'd like to sort of know how review how the new bylaw, new policy would, as Mr. Tibbet was saying, to do with how it relates to the zoning bylaw, and what if there's anything we should be concerned about, just given how important affordable housing is. So I'd still be more comfortable referring this to the APCs.
Director Wilson?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think Director Smith has brought up a lot of very valid points. One of the main things, of course, is displacement, especially at this time when we're looking at affordable housing, we're looking at everything. One of the things that I found, and I visited a lot of the mobile parks during 3 years ago and knocking on doors, these are people with very, very limited tangible assets, and they are normally in the older age bracket. This is their home. This is the only place we've got. And we're going to have to be very, very careful that we don't displace people like this because they've got nowhere else to go. They can't afford to go there. So at this moment, I can't support what's going on here until I've had a very close look at it. One of the other things is that has been brought up with the manufactured homes. The definition has to be tightened up, as has been pointed out. Pacific Homes puts out some of the most luxurious, huge manufactured homes, nuts, bolts, everything, down to the last screw and washer, that are huge. it's a manufactured home, but it's certainly not a mobile one, that's for sure. So I think we're going to have to be very careful here, especially from the point of view of displacement. Thank you.
Thank you. I turn to Director Morrison.
Thank you, and I don't mean to muddy the waters here, but I'm sort of looking at this from sort of the other end of the scale, where and it has to deal with definitions, and it's in regards to recreational vehicle parks, and so I'm really interested in the definitions and aspects of this as it relates to the recreational vehicle parks. And the reason why I'm asking is everybody, I think, understands what a recreational vehicle is. It's something that you pull in on wheels, and you're not supposed to put it on a foundation. But now we have the people are starting to bring the park model style of homes into recreational vehicle homes or parks. And I'm being very careful how I say this, but we have people that are using recreational vehicle parks as mobile home parks and are starting to exceed the maximum allowable occupancy and making them their principal residences. So it used to be very clear. There was the definition of the 240 and the park models and that sort of thing. Some clarity in this as to exactly what is allowed, and I agree we need to protect the people of lower socioeconomic scale that may not be able to afford another type of accommodation, but do we have policies that's going to prevent that opposite of happening, where people are going into what's deemed to be inappropriate housing in RV parks? And does the staff have any comment on whether or not we're going to see any policy in that regards? Because I've got 5 of them in my electoral area, and they were never intended to be for permanent occupancy, and I don't think it's people that are occupying these beyond the 22 weeks out of need. This is a choice that people are making. So does Mr. Tippett have any, or Ms. Garnett, any sage advice on what we'll be doing on that front?
Ms. Garnett.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm not aware at this point, and I would defer to someone who's in charge of work plans to be perhaps able to comment on that.
Ms. Cherolf, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly, affordable housing options will be discussions for the modernized OCP. That is almost a certainty. But one of the things I wanted to make the committee aware of was that the Local Government Act does allow the board to include provisions in a zoning bylaw to restrict the tenure of a zone or piece of land that includes or permits some multifamily housing. So it's something that's another tool that's in your toolbox that could be explored through the MOCP process, is restricting manufactured home parks to be rental only, as opposed to ownership housing. So I just wanted to throw that out there, but otherwise, I think going down a bit of a rabbit hole in terms of the policy the question that is before you, and that is really just looking at the policy that and bylaw that are in effect now, and trying to update and remove the content that, as Ms. Garnett said, is ultra vires or otherwise dealt with under the Local Government Act or under the BC Building Code.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. I was feeling the same way. We have a resolution on the floor, and it's been moved and seconded. And I do have one more speaker to go, and it's Director Nicholson. Oh, and then back to Director Smith. Go ahead, Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I have a question about water and proof of water. And we now have legislation in place that requires groundwater to be licensed for things like a mobile home park. So I am wondering why that is not a requirement in this update.
Ms. Garnett? or Ms. Charoff, who does this go to?
Madam Chair, I will endeavor to take it to take a stab at that question. I know that we recently had an enforcement situation involving unlawful RV park and worked in collaboration with provincial authorities around the water issue. So I think that would be outside of the scope of the CVRD's jurisdiction with respect to this particular bylaw, but still required, obviously, under the provincial legislation.
Okay, so, Director Smith, go ahead, please.
Thank you. So as the discussion has moved around the table, things that I've heard is that in this bylaw, we need to tighten up the definitions because of the manufactured homes are no longer single wide, double wide, that multiple homes and designs can be made in a facility or in a factory. And so I would like to see the definitions tightened up. I'd also like to see that the sewage, any part of the sewage system or septic system is not in the buffer area as it impacts the adjacent parcels. None of us would like to be beside one that has an odor issue. And also, I think that what we also need to realize is that even as an affordable component of our electoral areas, this is also an opportunity for those to remain in our community that are looking to downsize. They're putting their homes on the market and they're selling them to families, and then they're taking the time to move to a community environment. Many of the manufactured home parks are definitely a community. They look after each other, they share things, and it's very important for that as people downsize also. So I just wanted to indicate that.
Yeah, thank you. But it just remind you that the CVRD modular, even in here, that 209 is recommended to be rescinded on the basis of being inconsistent or redundant. So that's what we're voting on. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I would just like to follow up on this water licensing issue, because from my perspective, I didn't really understand the answer from staff. From my perspective, this is a case of it's clearly a provincial jurisdiction. And so I am not sure why we would want to waste time looking at pump tests and so forth when the province is required to decide whether there's adequate water or not and to license the mobile home park accordingly. So I still don't understand why we wouldn't just go down that route. Would it not be more efficient?
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, that is something that we can come back with if the direction is to send this back to staff for more work, something that we can respond to.
Okay, so I'm looking to committee. We have a resolution on the floor, and I am going to call the question. Oh, Director Nicholson, go ahead.
Well, then I think I would refer it back to staff, because I think this is something that we're going to be faced with over and over in the future. So I think we should take a look at this groundwater issue.
There's a referral motion. Is there somebody who will second the referral motion? Been moved and it's been seconded. Yes. Okay. So speaking to the referral. Seeing no one, so we are now voting on the referral to send it back to staff for more information. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. It is now 11:53. We have a very large, we have R8 and R9. So I'd like to say another 10-minute break right now. We'll come back to R8. Thank you.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, we are live.
Thank you so much, Ms. Harrison. Now we go to R8.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R8 is a report from the Community Planning Division regarding CVRD bylaw number 4349, Cannabis Uses 2021. And there is a 5-point recommendation before you.
Thank you so much. And thank you. And I'll turn to Ms. Garnett, who's going to do a presentation, and then we'll come back to the recommendations. Thank you, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. How is that looking?
That's good. We just have your side notes on the side if you want to make it bigger.
Okay, there we go. That should work.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So this staff report presents bylaw amendments to the individual zoning bylaws that respond to the board's previous direction on the topic of cannabis. And it updates, proposes to update 2 policies and rescind 1. So it is a very complicated bylaw, so the attachments help to sort of break it down. The attachment A is the bylaw itself, bylaw 4349, cannabis uses. Attachment B is the explanatory table, and that illustrates the changes to the zoning bylaws and also the changes to the policies. And attachment C and D are the illustrative mapping for retail and the commercial production and processing. So first, I'll just walk you through an example of the explanatory table that helps understand how to read it. So the column on the left provides the language from the existing zoning bylaw. The middle column is what's proposed in the bylaw amendment. So the key word here is to delete the content on the left. And then the column on the right explains the rationale for why that's being done. With respect to the bylaw specifically, what we have been attempted to do is to update the cannabis regulations with respect to federal legislation. And largely that is to eliminate the distinction between medical and recreational cannabis. And we've ensured that there are consistent regulations or definitions across the electoral area zoning bylaws. With respect to retail, the board's direction is to consider allowing cannabis retail in all zones that permit retail. But to keep in mind that the provincial license is still required and that's dependent on board approval. With respect to production and processing, the updates would be to permit cannabis cultivation and processing in the agricultural land reserve. And that's because the ALC use regulation permits this as a farm use, but it has to be in open field or in a greenhouse with a soil floor. Be retaining the 30-meter setback for all buildings to 30 meters to parcel lines and not less than 150 meters from a residence in the ALR. This 150-meter setback to a residence in the ALR is newly proposed from what's existing in the zoning bylaws. And finally, to not permit on parcels this use within 150 meters of parks, schools, childcare facilities, and certain zones, including residential, institutional, comprehensive residential, and mixed use. And this is a change from 300-meter setback to 150 in the proposed bylaw 4349. With respect to regulations for cannabis production processing out of the ALR, essentially we retaining what is currently exists in the zoning bylaws. So to permit production and processing in the industrial zones that have the existing allowance in the zoning bylaws. And these setbacks are the same as they are within the ALR as well. And I have some maps examples to show you that will help see what this would look like. So right now we are looking at a retail map. And reminder that these maps don't form a part of the bylaw itself. They're just attached to show what the implications are. They represent quite static information. So in this map, you can see the commercial zones within this particular electoral area that permit retail sales. And with adoption of bylaw 4349, those retail zones would allow for cannabis retail as well. You can also see on the map there's the black circles. This is the 300-meter buffer from uses such as childcare facilities, schools, and playgrounds. The 300-meter buffer is based on the retail store application criteria policy, which the board can use as guidance when it's responding to provincial referrals on cannabis retail store license applications. So this line is not a hard and fast one, it's rather policy guidance based on the policy that we'll be discussing later. This example is from the production and processing. So you can see that all the green hatching shows land in the agricultural land reserve, where production and processing would be permitted subject to the ALC's criteria. You can also see at the bottom of the screen the pink zone, which is an industrial zone that currently allows for production and processing and would continue to allow it under the bylaw 4349. Again, you can see sort of the solid black lines. They're a bit sort of round. These lines show the 150-meter buffer around uses such as schools, parks, and childcare facilities, and the residential and other zones I mentioned earlier. The way that bylaw 4349 is written, if the buffer extends at all onto that parcel, then the use is not permitted on that parcel. So in other words, production and processing would not be permitted on parcels that are affected at all by the buffer area. And this is a zoning regulation, so the only way this could be varied is through a development variance permit. We'll now just go to the policies themselves. So we're proposing to replace the CVRD Cannabis Production Facility Land Use Application Policy. This policy is used when the board is considering rezoning applications to permit a cannabis production facility. Really only minor changes to clarify language have been made from the 2019 version, and these changes are detailed in the explanatory table. Secondly, we're recommending to replace the Cannabis Retail Store Application Criteria Policy. This policy is used to inform the board's response to a request for comment on applications for a retail store license from the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. So again, minor changes to clarify language have been made, as well as adjustments for consistency with bylaw 4349, and the changes are in the explanatory table. And finally, we're recommending to rescind the Cannabis Regulation Bylaw Enforcement Policy. This policy was adopted prior to the Federal Cannabis Act, and the policy background acknowledges the temporary application of the policy, particularly as cannabis regulations are in such a state of change at the federal and provincial levels, and then by implication at the local level. And this policy is now outdated, and so we recommend it be rescinded. So we have had some direction from the board previously, which included updates to comply with federal legislation. We have spent a lot of time discussing the nuances of this bylaw, including setbacks and the impact of production in vulnerable watersheds. We've consulted with ministry staff informally at this stage. And from our perspective, it would be useful to receive formal comments from referral agencies. And so we are recommending that this bylaw proceed to first and second reading so we can do those formal referrals. And the recommendations with respect to the policies are on this slide here. Thank you. And please let me know if I should lower my and the share.
I think you should lower it now so I could see everyone.
Okay.
That'd be great. Any questions for staff? Director Wilson, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for that. That's all a bit confusing at times. Can you just go over the why there's 150 meters setback for production, but 300 meters for retail sales? I'm not quite sure why one should be different to the other.
Thank you. If I may respond through you, Madam Chair. Well, I guess the uses are quite different. One is talking about a retail store, and one is the actual production facility itself. So from a land use perspective, they have different impacts. The 300-meter setback for retail stores is based in a policy. So the board can choose to apply that policy, that 300-meter in a policy. And I believe in the past you've decided not to enforce that 300-meter when commenting back to the province. With respect to production processing facilities, originally it was a 300-meter setback within the zoning bylaws. It is currently 300-meter setback to those same uses. With input from the Ministry of Agriculture and the ALC, we're suggesting that be reduced because it's really quite a conservative approach and it really does limit the potential for production and processing because, as I said, if that buffer extends at all onto a parcel, then that use is not allowed on that parcel at all. It's not just a setback. So that is just in order to be taking, I think, a more current approach. Many local governments are taking even a 30-meter or 60-meter setback to those. So it just depends on the approach that the board wishes to take.
Okay, that's good, Alison. Thank you. Follow up, please, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, follow up.
Thank you. And excuse me, one of the other things on 4D, it says other areas where children and youth frequent. That's a very large, children and youth are everywhere. You know, I'm not quite sure about that one because that would restrict just about everywhere.
Yes, if I may, Madam Chair. Yes, I agree. Are you referring to the retail store application?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So again, that is a policy. So it is something that the board can choose to apply. We haven't mapped those in the explanatory mapping because it is very difficult to generate that data on a vast level. But on an individual referral application from the province, the board can choose to apply that criteria if it chooses to, and so it's at the board's discretion, really.
And I'm sorry, Madam Chair, just one more question on that particular one. Is it absolutely necessary to include that one? Because there is all sorts of other things in there as well, which are fairly restrictive. So that's the one I think I have pretty much some real concerns about.
And if I may again, Madam Chair, that criteria has been carried on from the previous retail criteria policy. And so we haven't proposed any changes, and it's up to the board to decide if they wanted to see that change. It is sort of a cautious approach that really does, it's kind of like a double check in a way.
Yeah. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. So I have a bit of a speakers list. I want to see if I've got it accurately down here. Acton, Nicholson, and Smith, and Martman. Okay, go ahead, please, Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm a little confused about the setback as well. The 150 for production going down from 300. I guess what it becomes a concern for the community is the odor that's produced. And I know that the home-based ones are totally different, but that is a huge issue here for us in our area. And so that 150 meters applies to residential. And so what does that actually look like when it comes to odor? And that doesn't sound like a very big area.
Ms. Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so when we originally we had the 300-meter setback, as I had said. And when we informally referred this bylaw to the Ministry of Agriculture and the Agricultural Land Commission, their comments were definitely to reduce that was overly restrictive. And we had a lot of conversation with them. Their guidance documents that the ministry has produced, it is based on medical production. So they're actually working to update their guidance bylaws based on the changes at the federal level. But they recommended to go down to 60 meters or 30 meters with a buffer. So we thought that going from 300 meters, which is the current zoning bylaw, down to 60 or 30 was too great of a change. And so we found some middle ground at 150. But as I said, this is based on feedback from the ministry and their sort of best practices bylaws.
Follow up, Director Acton.
Thank you. And sure, thanks for that. But as far as this goes, in our areas, thanks to the federal government, we've had zero forms of monitoring and enforcement on their own permits. So it's a little problematic if we're going to see any kind of compliance and even from the ALR, that we have very little support from them in the form of enforcing their own rules and regulations. So it's interesting from their perspective. Thank you.
Director Nicholson, go ahead, please.
Thank you. This is very comprehensive, and I really super appreciated the extra time that you spent on the water issues related to ALR land. But I also want to talk about the odor issues in ALR areas. So a lot of my area is agricultural land reserve, but intermixed with it is a fair amount of residential. And I am not convinced that 150 meters would protect people from the odor issues on ALR land if someone was to put a facility next to a subdivision. So is there another way of getting at that issue? Depending on
Ms. Garnett.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I think increasing the setback would be one option, certainly. There are buffering guidelines, although I don't know how well buffering would address odor as a particular issue. I think the setbacks are really meant to address a broad range of interface issues. I think also the addition of the 150-meter setback to even a residence in the ALR is an attempt to sort of address some of the concerns that I'm hearing voiced. I don't think that there is a perfect number that will address the problem at all. But keep in mind as well that the new ALC use regulation allows a different kind of growing within the ALR. So it is open field or in a soil-based floor. So I'm not even sure what the impacts of those regulations will be on the industry itself. My sense is that the industry has really suffered a lot, and they're not allowed the big industrial buildings, and even some companies are abandoning their big industrial buildings in the Lower Mainland because the market's not what it was. And so I'm not even sure if there's a clear sense of what the odor and other nuisance issues will be with open field and soil floor greenhouse as a method of production. So I think a lot remains to be seen, and certainly the board can take, as I said, a more conservative approach of increasing that setback if that's what they wish to do.
Follow up, Director Nicholson?
Yeah, I really think a more conservative approach because I just don't think we know. And open field, my goodness, that could be quite smelly.
I turn to Director Smith, Martman, and Kuhn. Director Smith, go ahead, please.
Thank you. A couple of points. I'm looking at the map for Area G, and I notice I'm thinking that the 150 line that's been drawn is for the Cowichan Valley Trail has been taken into account in that area. And then Stalking Creek Park, Princess Diana Park, Centennial Park for the production map. I'm just wanting to make sure that when I'm looking at it, I see the little line there and that those are all included.
Right. I've got so many papers here. I haven't been able to find that particular map, but all of the uses that were mentioned on the slide are what the mapping provides a buffer to. So those school, childcare facilities, and then all of the zones that included residential, institutional, parks, comprehensive development, which often include residential, and mixed use, which include residential as well.
The map that you showed during your presentation was Area G, and I didn't feel that the circle was based on the corner of the park for like Centennial Park or Stalking Creek Park with the 300 meters for the retail. I can't find that map now. Was it included in our package, the details for the retail?
I believe, yes, through Madam Chair, that those details were supplied, and I can't speak to the specifics of the map. We would have to double check that. I don't have that information available to me right now.
Okay, so I would like a little bit more clarification on these two maps. They didn't quite, especially the retail one seemed a little off. As for the farm gate sales, if the government hasn't made a regulation on that, I'm not sure that should actually move into a bylaw for the CVRD because it's sort of like putting the cart before the horse. And I'm not Also, that brings into an issue of traffic on some of the rural roads, that there's additional traffic placed on those rural roads. And I know that a lot of people complain about the traffic and the amount of traffic on a road. I'm not sure how would we then be looking at our bylaw officers to start enforcing some of these rules and the extra expense of that. I think that the bylaw is a good bylaw, but I wouldn't want to put the farm gate in it at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. I turn to Director Martman.
Thank you, Chair. And a comment that I think sometimes I get a bit confused, and so maybe staff can help me with this. But first off, we're talking about farming, and we're talking about the right to farm, the ability to, you will make noise, you will make odors, and we're talking about one type of farming and saying, well, we don't want odor from this. And as a farmer, I'm finding it's very hard to listen to because I'm waiting for when my cows are going to be too messy and too noisy, and wondering when that discussion will start to happen. So that just concerns me, because at the same time, and maybe I got the documents wrong, but we're talking about in the HOCP about having a referral from the Agricultural Land Commission saying, please put covenants, or maybe it's the Minister of Agriculture, please put covenants on land telling people that you're going to be living next to a farm, and there's going to be odors, and there's going to be noise, and there's going to be things that are going to disrupt you, because that's the nature of farming. And yes, cannabis brings maybe more noxious smells, but I tell you, the odor of putting turkey manure on fields is pretty pervasive throughout the neighborhood. And so I'm not sure at what point we want to really try to make rules or setbacks that are trying to tell farmers what they can and can't do on their property. And so the other piece about this is about the right to farm, and this is my question back to staff. If the Agricultural Land Commission has setbacks for cannabis manufacturing, and we want to put something broader in place, when a farmer says, I don't want to follow your rules, CBRD, I'm allowed to do this under the Agricultural Land Commission regulations. Who prevails?
Thank you. Through the chair, the ALC can say that a local government cannot prohibit a farm use, and that includes production of cannabis, according, as long as it's in an open field and or in a soil floor. But the local governments retain the ability to regulate the siting, and so that's clear. That's what we're talking about, I think, right now is where our ability to regulate and control this as a land use, and whether or not, how the board feels about singling this industry out compared to other industries, which is, I think, a valid point.
Okay, thank you. And maybe just a follow-up, and I think that also applies to Farmgate. Farmers need the ability to earn funds, and so farm gates is important. And so if that becomes something that's available to farmers, it is to me right now. I would hate to have this sort of be the beginning of the rest of the community saying, well, we do it for this, let's do it for this. So if people can't come to my farm and buy meat from me, then my ability to make, to be a farmer is really curtailed. And thanks for putting up with my view.
Thank you. I have Ms. Cross that would probably like to help us with the mapping question, I believe. Welcome, Andrea.
Hi, yes. I just wanted to point out the difference, a little bit of the difference between the buffers that were between the production and processing and the retail with regards to parks. For the production and processing, both parks and park zones were buffered with the 150-meter buffer. For the retail maps, and so parks would include the trail, that was a question. So it was all types of parks. existing developed, undeveloped CVRD municipal, BC and federal parks. So all the trails, everything that was in our parks layer is what was included in that. For the retail sales, the 300-meter buffer was on park zones, but parks that were not in a park zone wouldn't necessarily be buffered. They were buffered if they had a playground. That's how I found the playgrounds, was if they were in a park that's not in a park zone. That was an additional buffering, and sports fields and so on. So there could well be parks in the zone, in the retail maps, that aren't buffered if they aren't in a park zone or if they don't have a playground or a court or a field.
Thank you for that clarification. And I turn now to Director Kuhn and then Director Wilson. And I was hoping that we could have an hour for lunch before we started our 1:30 regular. So go ahead, Director Kuhn.
Yes, I have some of the same concerns that Director Martman expressed. If we start playing with the setback and say, okay, fine, for production we need 300 meters, you need a pretty big piece of property to even place something 300 meters from every side. So the question to me comes up then, well, maybe we should just generally disallow cannabis production, because if we're getting that rigorous about, well, we don't want that smell, we don't want this, well, maybe we should just close for business. I mean, this is getting ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. Yes, you have farming, and as Director Martman pointed out, yes, farming is at times loud, it's at times noisy, and if we get up applications for cannabis production, if we come up with hard rules like, okay, we need 300 meter setback, well, find me a piece of property where you can do that. I mean, that's you know, that's pretty well saying, nah, we don't really want that. Sorry. Well, are we open for business or are we not? Thank you.
Was there a question for staff in that?
No, not really, just a comment.
Okay, okay. I turn to Director Wilson, and then I go back to Director Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Director Martman brings up some very, very good points here. You know, you're really restricting his ability to do anything on his farm that he is actually allowed to do, and he's put it very well. Now, from the farm gate point of view, he's hit the nail on the head here. They've got to be allowed to make some extra money. There's no money in, you know, they're having trouble anyway. But I did actually speak with one of the cannabis retailers here and mentioned this farm gate sales to him and said, do you have any problems with this? And he said, no, none whatsoever. This is something which has to be allowed. And yes, there may be some traffic problems. There may be some other little congestion problems, but the farmers need something here. Let's give them some, it's almost like throwing them some crumbs which they need desperately. Let's give them as much latitude as we can.
Yeah, I have a feeling this is going to go on for a while, so we will have to refer this R8 and R9 to after our regular next meeting, and so we'll have to do that. So we'll come back, and I know I have Director Smith as the next speaker to this one, and because we have the 10 minutes break that we need to do for public input, so or question period. So I'm going to Director Morrison.
So moved. Did we refer to the end of the next meeting?
Okay. Do we need that, Ms. Harrison?
Just a point of clarification, if we are referring this to after today's regular session,
Yes.
then question period would follow that.
Oh, so we can do that. Okay. All right. And is there any way, if today's meeting at 1:30 goes on too long, that we can refer this, that could then be referred to Thursday? Okay, because this is going to be, this is just adding on to our extended day today. So, so with that, it's now 12:35, and we will continue this meeting at another time and see everyone at 1:30. Do I have that correct? Okay, thank you so much. See you at 1:30.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.